Alright, so let's move on to the next question. Question number 21. Consider the following statements. Fiscal deficit represents the total borrowings required by the government in a financial year. Statement 2. Fiscal deficit is calculated as total expenditure minus total receipts excluding debt creating capital receipts. So here this question is actually about fiscal deficit of a government, right? So I'll just give you a brief understanding of the fiscal deficit and all those things. So imagine the central government or the state government. Imagine a government, right? So the government say it expends this much. Okay, expense this much. So the concept of deficit simply means you are actually spending more but you are not getting enough income. Okay, that is basically the concept of deficit, right? So in the case of a government, say it is spending this much. Okay, say 20 trillion, okay, 20 lakh crores. Okay, 20 lakh crores. Okay, it is expenditure is this much. So expenditure is again divided into revenue expenditure and capital expenditure, right? Revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure includes, yeah, salaries, then other interest payments. Okay, that is, so if the government had actually taken a loan, the interest payments given by that government to meet that loan obligation is actually a revenue expenditure, right? Subsidies on food, subsidies on fertilizers, okay, these are all revenue expenditure, and generally they will not lead to the creation of any asset. Okay, so these kind of expenditure are generally considered not good for the economy because they do not create assets which will ineffectively pay for itself. Okay, they do not create assets which pays or pays for itself. Like for example, if you had created a road, that road would have improved connectivity, it would have improved economic growth. Okay, so the amount that you spend for constructing that road inevitably it will come back to you in the form of economic demand. Okay, in terms of economic growth. But these kind of expenditure do not create assets. Okay, so these are called recurring expenditure. You need to keep on pumping money into it. These are all committed expenditure. It's not easy to roll back. You need to keep on paying it. Okay, and also it does not create assets, so it does not pay off itself. So it is not considered good, right? In fact, the FRBM Act actually mandates that the revenue deficit should be, it should be 0% by 22-23. That's a different discussion, but I hope this concept is clear. Then you have something known as the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure includes like for example, construction of like I said, infrastructure like roads, railways, and all those. Buying machinery, buying land. Then you say the government actually gave loans to the state government. Okay, or it gave loan to somebody else. Okay, these are all. Okay, that's actually capital receipts. So capital expenditure is actually the government is actually what can you say? Like I said, it actually constructed infrastructure, right? So infrastructure. Okay, so these kind of investments, they pay off by themselves. Okay, there is asset creation taking place. Asset creation. Okay, I hope this is clear, right? So these capital expenditure are generally considered good for the economy, right? Okay, so this is the expenditure, right? And say receipts. Okay, this is the receipt. Say receipts are 10 lakh crore. Okay, 10 lakh crore are receipts. Okay, so expenditure is 20 trillion, 10 trillion is the receipts. And receipts you can again divide into revenue receipts as well as capital receipts. Okay, revenue receipts and capital receipts, right? Revenue receipts includes, you have tax receipts, non-tax receipts, right? Non-tax receipt means, say the central government actually gave loan to a state government. That loan itself is actually a capital receipt. Okay, that is if they pay back the loan. But the interest payments made by the state government to meet that loan obligation, that is actually a non-tax receipt. Okay, non-tax receipt. It also includes fines, various other things as well. Tax receipts, Capital receipts are again divided into debt creating capital receipts and non-debt creating capital receipts. Okay, so these are the subdivisions. So essentially, the fiscal deficit, if you calculate, is this gap, right? This gap is what we call as the fiscal deficit, the bridge between expenditure and receipts. So the equation will be revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure subtract revenue receipts and capital receipts, right? But there is an issue here. There's a logical issue here because you have already the government actually takes loans to meet this bridge, okay, to meet this gap. Okay, that amount is what we call as the debt creating capital receipts. Okay, so that is already part of the capital receipts. Okay, so if you just subtract this, it will involve double counting. Okay, it will involve double counting. Okay, so this value, okay, this bridge, okay, this is what we call as the fiscal deficit. It is the annual borrowing, net borrowing requirement of the government. Okay, so if you simply subtract expenditure and receipts, the receipt already by equation, due to the theory, it already includes the capital debt creating capital receipts. So if you again subtract it, it will involve, you will subtract it 2 times. Okay, so there is a slight change in the equation. Okay, what is a slight change in the equation? Okay, so the equation would look like, you add the expenditure, revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure, and you subtract the total receipts. Okay, you total receipts. Okay, but you have to exclude the debt creating capital receipts. Okay, so from the receipts you have to take out the debt creating capital receipts and then you have to subtract. Okay, because the debt creating capital receipts is what the final borrowing requirement. Okay, but when you calculate, what happens is that the receipts already include this. Okay, already include this. This is actually a logical issue. Okay, so we can also write it as the non-debt capital receipts, right? You only take the non-debt capital receipts and you subtract it from the net expenditure, you will get the fiscal deficit. Okay, I hope this concept is clear, right? So fiscal deficit represents the total borrowings required by the government in a financial year. It is correct. Fiscal deficit is calculated total expenditure minus total receipts, excluding debt creating capital receipts. Okay, so you take the total expenditure, this is the total expenditure, then you take the receipts, okay, total receipts, but you have to subtract the debt creating capital receipts. In fact, this value is what you will get when you calculate the non-debt capital receipts. So if you subtract the non-debt capital receipts also, you will get the same value. Okay, so just read the question. So this is actually correct, right? This is actually correct. It minus the total receipts excluding the debt creating capital receipts is actually correct, right? So this will give the total net borrowings in a particular year. So this statement actually explains this statement. So option A is the answer. Okay.